All right. So far, we have learned what hook functions are. We've also learned the most important hook functions, use state and use effect hooks. We've already learned context API in class components, remember? So now I'd like to come back to the context API project, and in that project, we're going to see how we can use these React hooks within context. So to do this, let's go back to the Context API app, and I have opened Context API in my code editor and in the browser over here. So you can pause the video here and open it up in your code editor and start your local server by saying npm start in the project directory. Cool, so after it opens up in your code editor and your browser, we can start to learn how to use these two hooks and context together. So we're going to start to consume context using React hooks. Now, at the moment, we have these two contexts, auth context and theme context. And we consume these in different components in navbar, as well as in the to-do list component over here. And to show you how to use hooks and context together, I'm going to refactor these components with new React functional hook components, and then we'll be able to see the usage of both contexts on the same pattern. And of course, we're going to see which usage of the context is cleaner and more readable. Okay, so let's do that. First of all, I'm going to come into this to-do list component, and I'm going to start from this component. Okay, so we can see that we consume the context right here using static context type. Now, remember that we said if we were to use a functional component, we can't use this method of consuming context. We can't do that in a functional component. We can only do it in class components. So what if we wanted to turn this into a functional component and use the context? Can we do that? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. But we can consume context with this context consumer in functional component. We can absolutely do that, so let's use it in a functional component. But I'll tell you what, there is another option, and we can do that in functional components in a cleaner way. So we can do that with the help of the UseContext hook, all right? So let's learn how to use it right here. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is import that up here, UseContext. So this is just another hook function that we can use inside of a functional component. Now I'm going to rewrite this component in a functional way using a functional component, and then we're going to use this hook right here to consume the context inside it. So I'm going to keep this here for reference just for now, and I'll come down here and I'm going to create a functional component. So I'm going to say const to-do list, and this is going to be a functional component. Now inside this component, I will say return some JSX, and then we will export this component again as well. So inside here, we will still want to return the same JSX right here. So now let's copy all that and paste it inside here, like so. All right, so the next thing I want to do is use this hook to consume context inside this functional component. Because, just as we said, we can't use this inside a functional component. We could use this context consumer inside a functional component. But I like using this UseContext hook because I think it's much cleaner. So that's what we're going to use. All right, so how do we do it? All I'm going to do is come down here and I'll say use context and then pass in the context that we want to use inside this component. So we want to use theme context inside this component. And we imported that right here, theme context. So let's copy that and paste it in here. Okay, so we are saying here that we want to use this context. And this is going to provide us with that context object with all of these different properties in it. So let's open up the theme context. And it's going to provide to us everything in this state, all these properties, and also this change theme function. So what we could do is destructure those from this UseContext hook, just like we did in here. So I'm not going to write it again. I'm just going to copy this and paste it in front of the UseContext. So now this UseContext hook returns to us everything that appears up on the value props of this theme context. So now we're just grabbing these properties from this thing. And that's all that we have right here, okay? All right, so now this time we are going to just be using a hook to get that context object, and we're destructuring these different properties from that context object. All right, so now that we have those, and we can also do this logic right here to find out the theme, so I'll copy that and paste it down here. So we're still evaluating the theme in here. If this is dark theme Boolean value is going to be true, then we will turn this dark theme property. And if it's false, this light theme would be returned. So we turn in either light or dark, depending on that Boolean for the theme. And then we're just using those properties to output some different colors on these different UI elements. And look at that. I mean, that's all you need to do to use context inside of a functional component. So what do you think? I think it's much cleaner, easier, and also it looks a whole lot nicer, um, even though it's only a couple of lines shorter. Also, I think even, when you compare these two, this one, when we use the consumer tags, it seems to me just a little messy. But over here, look at this. It's very simple, very clean. So what I'm going to do is just delete this one. And I'm going to delete this old class component. We don't need that anymore. So let's save all that and go back to the browser and see if it all works just like we think it will. And we'll go back to the browser and watch it. Okay, so that's good. See, nothing has changed, and, well, I didn't expect anything to change. I just want it to work the way that it did before. The functionality should be just the same, right? But it's the coding that's different. So that's perfect. So there we go, my friends. That is how we can use context inside a functional component using the UseContext hook. And hey, wouldn't you like it if the world was that easy? So let's take a short break here and we'll come back in the next lesson.